Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me all? Good morning. Good morning. My name is Cynthia Van Tall. I'm an NRC board member, and I'm here in cold California. I know it's colder for you folks other places, but I'm not used to it. Actually, my name is Cynthia Van Tall. I've been in the solid waste and recycling industry for 25 years. My company is called Mariposa Eco Consulting. I'm an independent woman-owned consulting, very busy, but a proud board member of the NRC. One shameless plug, I'm also the co-chair for the library committee, and we're always looking for amazing articles and presentations, and we're love to fill up our library. It's hungry, hungry, hungry. So we'll put the link in, Maggie, if you're listening, we'll put the link into the chat box, and please send us your articles. We'll send you your own folder with your own name on there, and you could just fill it up, and we really appreciate that. We're trying to make that as award-winning as possible, and we work really, really hard. Thank you, Maggie, for doing that. So today, our presentations is regarding multifamily recycling. We have three awesome speakers. We have Matt James from the Recycling Partnership, Alex from the city of Columbus, Ohio, and Evan Noel from the Orlando, Florida. And Evan, it's great to see you. I'm glad you survived the hurricane of 2022. I think that's one of many that we've had this year. Our lineup is going to be, first, we're going to have Matt start with the Recycling Partnership and talk about their toolkit that they created. And then we'll do, Ari and Matt, you could fight it out after that. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. And let's go, Matt.
All right. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll get started. First of all, thanks to the NRC. What a wonderful opportunity to talk about multifamily recycling. It's such an important frontier for our industry, and I feel very lucky to be able to chat about this with you all today. So my role with the Recycling Partnership, I'm a grant development manager. So talk a little bit about our grant program. But I'm always seeking new communities to work with, new property management companies to work with regarding multifamily recycling. So I started in June, and I'm just so thrilled to be part of a fantastic organization. So I want to say a quick thank you to our funding partners. As you can see here, we're growing, and without them, we wouldn't be able to have our grant program and all the other fun, wonderful things that our organization does. So multifamily recycling is such an important issue because as we're looking to boost recycling access and recycling tonnage across the country, the biggest gap that we see in residential recycling really is in the multifamily sector. There are 20 million units in America that are multifamily apartment units, and 13 million of those 20 million don't have any on-site recycling options. So they may have a drop-off center, miles away in the country, or maybe something downtown, but nothing convenient for 13 million units. That's obviously not only a problem, but potential for growth into that sector. Residents overwhelmingly love to see recycling opportunities, whether they understand how it works or not. We've done a survey. I think over 80% of Americans see recycling as a valuable service. And of course, that applies to our multifamily population as well. So it's an issue about equitable access, where single family curbside recycling has been growing and expanding and maybe even plateauing in the last few years. There's still such a huge gap in the multifamily sector. And that's where we want to close the equitable access gap. We imagine that, there's 80+% of folks that want to recycle in America. If we capture 80% of those multifamily recyclables, we would yield 4 million new tons every year coming out of the sector. So it's just a fantastic opportunity, tons of potential, and we just want to see it grow and become on the same par as single family access. So the main barriers to that growth, to that potential, are some common challenges that I'm sure we'll hear from the other speakers and that we've heard from pretty much all of our grantees and clients that we've worked with across the country. Those are anywhere from inconsistent service styles and space constraints, and especially in garden style homes, a lot of the recycling and trash corrals are placed in what they consider to be parking spaces. My last townhouse that I lived in, we had a giant corral right in the middle kind of the site, which was great for me because I love to recycle, of course. But the apartment managers may have some pushback because they say, oh, we need X amount of parking spaces for the folks that live here. So that's, of course, an obstacle. And then getting apartment manager buy-in is also such a important aspect because they're going to be the main contact between the community or the hauler that actually serves the residential area and the residences. And so if they don't have enough buy-in, there might be contamination problems from lack of education and outreach regarding recycling and what belongs in the recycling stream. And of course, the multifamily sector tends to have a transient population. So folks that may live in city A recently moved to city B where they have different recycling rules. And of course, we want to try and stay consistent across the board, but they may be confusion because of the lack of uniformity. One apartment may have dumpsters, the other may have carts or the roll-off container with a hopper and a compactor, and it can just be confusing from moving one style to another. So that can be a common challenge. And of course, there's a large multilingual population that lives in many apartments across our country, and they need recycling education and outreach just like everyone that speaks English. And so making sure that we tailor our messaging and customize our outreach materials to meet the needs of those communities is so vital to educating folks what actually belongs in the recycling cart or the recycling dumpster and what's technically contamination in that specific program. To combat some of those challenges that we see across the board, we have some best management practices that we've put into our recycling or our multifamily recycling toolkit. So of course, consistent, sustained would be another adjective to put there. Consistent and sustained education is fundamental to any high performing recycling system, especially multifamily, where folks are moving in and out and they need to learn the new rules and new locations of their recycling corrals. In-unit containers are another kind of useful technique to remind folks on a daily basis to, instead of throwing their bottles or cardboard in the trash with their garbage, to, we have a blue container here, 18-gallon, 14-gallon, however big. It's just a convenient way to remind folks, like, this is where our recycling goes, and we can take it out with when we take our trash, and make sure we take it to the co-located recycling point, usually located at a corral or where the waste is, to make it a convenient trip for everyone. And lastly, one I think is kind of up there with maybe the second most important thing behind education is apartment manager buy-in. In the past, I worked for local government, and my whole job was just to reach out to apartment managers and talk to them about recycling, educate them about, what we're seeing in their stream that may be considered contamination, how to best reach out to their residents, to provide them free outreach materials or magnets that they can hand out to residents when they move in. Just they're the go-between between the residents that actually are doing the recycling and bringing their material to the carts or the bins, and the hauler or the community that actually services the recycling area. So I mentioned in-unit containers, and this is something we've tried in a few of our grants that's been pretty successful. We're agnostic between what we call totes and bins being the hard, non-flexible plastic. Here on the left side of the screen, they can be 18 gallons, 14 gallons, something about that size. They're more durable, they last longer. The con to that may be it may leave with the resident if they move out, and it's a relatively more expensive option. However, it's very effective to remind folks to collect their recycling in their kitchen or their living room, wherever they may do that. I know that I have a little 18-gallon bucket that I put all my recycling in, so it's just a useful giveaway to residents when they first move into an apartment. And we've done several grant programs with both those 18-gallon bins and also these totes that you see hanging on the door there on the right. They're a little bit more economical. They're cheaper. You can actually print the outreach and the recycling education material right on the side of it there, which is pretty useful. It may not hold as much material, but it's very easy to distribute. And like we say, we don't really see a difference in the success rate of getting people to recycle between totes and bins, but they're both effective. We'd encourage anyone to maybe try it out in your community. You can talk about grant funding and how we could potentially do a pilot in your community with one of these options. Of course, as I've mentioned several times, using education materials is completely vital, whether that's a one-page flyer, a door hanger. My personal favorite is a magnet that you can stick right up there on your fridge and never leave. Like all my I have, I don't know, maybe 15 to 20 like save the dates and like Christmas cards that have just like always stayed on my fridge, including recycling magnets. So a very useful tool. But showing people like actually how to do recycling, and it seems obvious to us, but to the resident moving in and not knowing where to find their recycling corral or how to use their bin, this might be a useful tool. And the recycling partnership has, as you can see in this template, the ability to create and customize based on an existing templates that we've made. For instance, this one was done with Sarasota County, and we've got all our logos on there, and it's been passed out to residents so they understand how to recycle. And then Spokane, Washington, we tried a similar technique with the totes and the door hangers. We saw a significant decrease in contamination as we passed out these tote bags and handed out door hangers, just to remind folks of, we don't want to see too many plastic bags or bagged recyclables that are just going to get tossed away in the MRF as contaminants. So just a good, consistent reminder to folks about how to recycle. This is a similar project we did in San Diego. You can see we used totes and did, paid a grant to do recycling brochures in English, Spanish, Tagalog, Vietnamese, to customize the recycling outreach and education to each community, because we all have different communities with different linguistic needs. And so you can find a lot of these materials and customizable templates and best practices in this in the toolkit that I'll speak about in a second. And lastly, another best practice we've seen is bringing in valet service if done correctly. We did a project in San Marcos, Texas, in which we tried education and just education in a handful of apartment units, education plus bins in a handful of apartment units, and then educations plus bin and valet service in another handful of apartments. Valet service being a door-to-door collect. Right. Should I pick up where I left off? Does that sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay. Not sure
Hold on,
what
they're
happened.
not back. Is everybody back? Because they're asking what happened.
We have 54 people, 55 people. There were 57 people in the room originally. So folks are coming back.
Okay. All right. You hearing me? Okay.
We hear you great. Sorry about that. You are on such a roll. I was really enjoying the presentation. So
yeah, me too, man. Okay. I'll figure out where I was. So I was talking about some intervention styles we did, I believe, in San Marcos, Texas, to see how before and after the recycling generation and capture changed. And we basically found the more money that you invest into the multifamily recycling program with the 3 styles of using valet service, education, and in-unit bins, the more recycling and lower contamination, essentially. The catch with valet service is making sure that the service provider debags the recycling and doesn't just throw away the entire bag into the recycling cart where it's then going to be treated as contamination. So that's obviously the catch there. But I've alluded to this a few times. We have a multifamily recycling.
Can you explain what valet service is? Everybody's asking really fast.
Sure. So valet service, I might have cut out when I was talking about that earlier. So it's basically door-to-door recycling collection in which a service provider will come to your apartment and you can put out your recycling in either a bin or a clear plastic bag, and then they collect it and take it to a collection point. It's similar in practice to curbside recycling. So it has really good participation. The catch being it's more expensive and you need to ensure that there's no full bags of recycling being thrown away into a cart to break open the bags and pour them out into the recycling receptacle. So alluded to this a few times, but the multifamily recycling guide, we have it on our website. It has, we have the URL there, down there on the left side of the screen. It's just a free tool to folks if they want to check out some best practices that I've discussed in my presentation, or find a way to use multifamily recycling ordinance and how I think we're going to hear about that later from Orlando, but how to pass one of those and make sure that everyone has equitable access to recycling in stages, and of course using customizable outreach materials that we have available. This is just some more information about our toolkit. You can see we have a postcard there on the left, a door hanger on the right. Feel free to use them. They're free. We'd love to work with you and customize them to fit your community's needs with the language requirements, the accepted list that fits your community. So just a plug for that. And I wanted to just throw this on the screen. We've worked with several communities across the country and tried a number of different strategies, and along the way collected measurement and data about what has worked, what has not worked. And we'd love to dig into that with folks. If you want to, feel free to reach out to me. I'm again, Matt James, Recycling Partnership. I make grants for recycling, multifamily recycling access for communities, haulers, whoever provides service to apartments. Please reach out to me. That's my email address, mjames@Recycling Partnership. And I appreciate NRC for having me. I'm, of course, this panel with Ari and Evan is fantastic. So I appreciate the time, and I look forward to hearing from y'all. Feel free to give me an email or call.
Just let's see if we had any questions. Belly service. How often are you doing grants? I mean, and how do we know they're being released?
So our multifamily grant program, unlike our curbside recycling program, doesn't have a formal RFP, and pretty much all of our grant programs at the Recycling Partnership are on a rolling basis. We're always accepting applications. Basically, the application is reaching out to me and working together to make a scope that fits the community's needs. And of course, what we're aiming for with the Recycling Partnership, which is new access and new tonnage coming from the recycling system.
Are developers being required to engineer for recycling collection and new construction? Most high rises have chutes for trash, but nothing convenient for recycling on each floor.
Yes, so it depends on the locality. Like all recycling, it's very it's very community specific. And for a community, we have a few examples where I'm from in North Carolina that have recycling ordinances that require new development or to make sure that they have recycling corrals, or existing developments to phase in recycling access based on the size of the unit. So for instance, if there is 100 units, they need to phase in sooner. And I know that Evan's going to talk about that. I want to step on his territory.
Just a couple questions. Have you had the similar experience in multifamily for organics?
Multifamily organics. So the Recycling Partnership has traditionally been focused on residential recyclables from bottles, cans, paper, packaging. We haven't delved into organics yet, but from my understanding, the same principles would apply of consistent education, making sure that there's little contamination using a multilingual approach. And I believe that's some examples that I've heard of recently, and I think of Washington, where they used in-unit bin giveaways to spur advancement and collection.
Okay, there was somebody in the chat that just, I can give some insight on the question as well. Evan's going to say that too.
Evan, yeah.
I have to give you just a quick thing. We, in California, we're so, with our band-aids, organics have been banned for the landfill for the last couple of years. So we brought in some experienced customer reps to set up multifamily recycling, and that are always in the field, on the ground. But we asked them to do phone calls, and they were horrible at phone calls, calling owners, just the worst, just to make that connection. And we brought in some experienced customer service reps, and we called them Lily. For some reason, people responded to Lily. And you just have to have, when it comes to making those phone calls, you just have to be, I think the people on the phone, because they're used to hiding, I don't know, They're so good at making those connections. So in Southern California, my team, I use people that are experienced people on the phone, not people that are actually knocking on the doors to making those phone calls because they just can't set them up. So, and we've had really good luck with Lily. That's just my insight. Okay. Any more questions? And or otherwise we can go to who's going to be next? Is it Ari or who decided to go next?
I'm happy to go next.
Okay, great.
All right, let me share my screen here. Okay. So I'm Ari Alex. I am one of the sustainability managers here at the City of Columbus in the Department of Public Service. And I want to give a little bit of an overview of the multifamily recycling pilot project that we're currently running here. And a lot of it actually just goes back to what we were hearing about the recycling partnership. So we are one of the proud award winners of one of those grants. So in partnership with the Recycling Partnership and SWACO, the Solid Waste Authority of Central Ohio, which owns and manages our landfill, we decided to come up with a 6-month pilot project to deploy and test recycling at multifamily units here. We originally had set the goal of 10,000 units and for a 6-month window. So we wanted to see what that looked like. And so I'm going to go through a little bit about what that concept actually evolved into, some of the successes that we've had, and a few of the challenges that I can highlight, which kind of, I think, will be similar to what we just heard here too. So in the city of Columbus, we're the 14th largest city in the country, and we are growing at a rapid rate. We have more multifamily units being built than any other structures here. Before the pandemic, we're building about 3,000 new residential units a year. We are now building 4,000 or 5,000 residential units a year. That demand is continuing to skyrocket. And the region's been named one of the fastest growing apartment markets in the country. So we really saw the need to capture that, that material. We currently at the city run curbside residential recycling for single family homes. And we run trash service at the multifamily complexes, but we don't run recycling service there. And so this is a really good opportunity for us to kind of explore what that looks like. So this also ties back to our city's climate action plan. Last year, Mayor Andrew Ginther here at the city introduced the Climate Action Plan, which brings the city to net carbon neutrality by 2050. A portion of that is diverting our waste from our landfill. And so by 2050, we have a goal of diverting 95% of recyclable material to the landfill. And that is about 250,000 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions that we think we mitigate being released into our atmosphere. And so the only way we actually achieve that goal is by adopting multifamily recycling, because that is where the bulk of our housing stock is going to be here in the future. We know that's where the majority of our residential waste stream is going to be generated from. So when we look at the project, we wanted to do a few big goals. We wanted to implement a pilot project. We wanted to test cameras to determine whether the technology could be assistive in this. And we wanted to develop some educational toolkits and see how residents and property managers responded to that as we worked to kind of work out all the little bugs in what multifamily recycling might look like. So we, of course, wanted to measure this, and we started by looking originally with units that only had compactors in them, trash compactors, because that way we could get tonnage on a weekly basis and figure out diversion. And what we found out was that there were not enough units that were able to participate that had compactors, that they really had the traditional dumpsters. And so we kind of pivoted and started working on that. We also wanted to have a camera system that would tell us the frequency that these dumpsters were filling up. And that would tell us how much material and how much volume of material we were generating. We were doing a pre and post survey. As you can see here in this picture, this is the waste audit of the pre-survey. We pulled some dumpsters from these complexes and looked through their stream. And then we wanted to make sure that we were evaluating the cost of the service and how much material was being generated per unit so that we could look at an ultimate code change here at the city. So our initial kind of interest in this, we had sent out communications and reached out to property owners and landlords. We had 42 complexes respond that they were very interested. And ultimately, we deemed that 38 of those 42 complexes would be suitable to have containers. And when we talk about suitability, we wanted to make sure that there was space to add the dumpsters, that our front end loaders could service those dumpsters, that there were enough people that were living in those units. It wasn't just like a small 10-person unit, that we had some more density. So we really kind of narrowed it down. We got 40 front load containers here. You can see these dumpsters, and we really put a lot of messaging on these. So at the front, we used heavy visuals. We did not rely on text as much. We wanted to make sure that things were visually explained, all of the things that we were having. We had side doors where, again, we had stickers on them. So you can see we put a lot of signage on here to try to make these as visible as possible and to make them as easy to understand as possible. So here's another kind of look in these signages. We really clearly put what materials were accepted and what were not. We placed these and did these in-house here at the city, where we actually went through and did all of these dumpsters. We numbered all the dumpsters, and we also put cameras in them. And so part of the test here is to look at what kind of footage we can get. So these cameras were from Compology. They were installed in the dumpsters, and they took pictures on a set schedule for us. And they did a few things here. One, they allowed us to track the location of the dumpsters. They had, they could take the pictures, we could see how full the dumpster was, and we would get an alert if the dumpster was being, getting too full or not full enough. And we were able to kind of see the material. Let's say, for instance, someone put, a couch in the dumpster. We would immediately be able to see that and notice that there was some contamination in there. Luckily, that hasn't been, we haven't had any major contamination, but this would give us the ability to kind of look at these remotely throughout the city. We are a city of 250 square miles. And so us going out and kind of checking these dumpsters on a daily basis was definitely prohibitive. So this really kind of helped us with that. We also had pilot toolkits. And so we had materials that went to the property managers and the residents when those dumpsters deployed. So a couple of days before the dumpsters deployed, we had a team of individuals that went door to door and knocked on all of the units in that building or in that complex that were going to be getting recycling. They got a bag, a reusable bag, which had the materials that were accepted, that they could put their recyclables in and walk that over to their dumpster. And we also included some other information like magnets and some papers that explain, how recycling works here in the city. We had this toolkit that we could give to complex managers that as new residents came in, or if residents needed more additional information, they had that available there at the front desk for residents. So you can see a little bit of our educational outreach. This is a cling that we had that people could put on their refrigerator or on their door that explained the materials. We also had the property management send out an alert to the residents that, hey, this is coming, here are the rules, here's if you have questions. We also built out a lot of social media around this. So you can see you have Santa Claus here. We had one of our team members dress up as Santa. This dumpster was delivered in December of last year. And we made a video about it, that we were getting the gift of recycling at that complex. And so we use that to kind of drive excitement and entertainment. Recycling can often be confusing and people, need information. If we can make it fun and accessible, we thought that was a really good tactic. We did this continued education throughout the whole program. One of the things that we did on the collection side here is this is the first time the city had dedicated trucks for hauling this. We haul our own waste, but we have a private vendor do our residential curbside recycling. this actually got the city into servicing these dumpsters, and we were servicing them twice a week. We are currently servicing them twice a week. Some of the challenges that we faced here, first, we really identified a lot of private or valet services that were already in action. When we decided to do this, our theory was that there was very little multifamily recycling happening because the main haulers weren't reporting anything to us, and we weren't kind of getting that information. As we started reaching out to these properties, we found out there were a lot of private services that were already in place. And we didn't want to take over that business. We didn't want to interfere on the private side. So that was something that was really eye-opening and a good thing for us. When we called it a pilot program, there was a lot of hesitation from property owners, thinking that if they start the service and it's a 6-month program, that, you know, we pull it and their residents are demanding it, and now they have to spend the money to do it. So there was a little bit of hesitation on that. Some of the property managers thought it was too good to be true that the city was going to come in and offer free recycling for the residents, and they were always asking us what the catch was, and had some hesitation there. The biggest thing that we had was, the challenge we had was just the lack of space. Our current city code has space requirements for trash dumpsters and compactors, but it doesn't require space for recycling dumpsters. And so oftentimes we had to take 2 or 3 parking spaces away if someone wanted to participate in this. In some places that wasn't the problem, where there was ample parking, but in other units, it was really difficult. And additionally, some of those areas that even if they did have that extra parking, they didn't have the space for our front end loaders to make the turn and actually capture that material from the dumpster. Complex management, we saw a lot of changeover in management and staff as some of the job markets changed here. And so following up with people, sometimes we would find out that, you know, a week or 2 ago, they weren't there anymore. And so that communication caused some delays. We also had some deployment delays on getting some of the containers out there and making sure our schedules lined up with when the complex could accept it and when we could do education. Part of that was the pandemic and just our staffing levels at the city, which are now recouping. We've also been trying to right-size containers. Some of the containers really overflowed really quickly because we didn't have enough containers there, and some didn't fill up quickly enough. And so trying to figure out the right amount of size for those containers. And then the challenge around continuous education. Apartment complexes are unlike residential homes that people buy, in that people are transient and they come in and out of those spaces. So how did we keep up the education with those individuals? How did we get notified when there was a new resident, what kind of education materials that we could do? So I think looking at what next year, and this is my last slide, we're going to continue the pilot. So we have decided that we will run this, we won't stop this pilot. Where we have the dumpsters deployed, we're going to continue servicing those. We'll look at expanding those as we build out and look for more funding. We'll start a post survey here to see what kind of diversion rates we're doing. We'll do a recycling audit. And we are looking at a citywide multifamily code evaluation. And what that looks like here at the city are, you know, probably 2 things. One, for new builds, we think it's really easy to make a code change for anything new that's being built in the area that's requiring recycling dumpsters, as well as probably organics collection. And then the second part of that would be, how do we kind of change and make retroactive code change for some of the existing properties where we know that there are some challenges for doing that. And so we'll probably take 2 tracks on that. And with that, we think we'll get a lot more recycling. And so I didn't see any of the questions come through, but there's all of my contact information, and I'd be happy to take some questions.
There is some questions, and I know that Matt's going to want to give some input too. Let's see. Ari, what is your definition of recyclable waste located in the CAP plan?
Yes. So in our climate action plan, we identified what we think is recyclable. We did that through a waste audit with our solid waste district, our landfill in 2018, 2019. We determined what materials we thought were recyclable or could have the ability to possibly be recyclable in the future based on markets. And so from that, we kind of broke down what materials are there. Some of those materials we currently accept at our local MRF. Some of those we would expect to or would like to see being accepted here in the future as we look towards diversion, total diversion. And I'm happy to share that full audit and the climate action plan with anyone that's interested. You shoot me an email, my email's on the screen. I'd be happy to share those documents with folks.
So there was 2 questions about the cameras. How much do they cost? And the privacy issues. So I know, and I know they're focused on the bin interior. So,
yep.
Do you want it?
Yeah. So first of all, so the cost, I think they're a few $1,000s. They're pretty expensive per unit. The privacy, so they're not video cameras, they are still cameras, and they take static images. And so they're taking pictures, I think, at like 6 a.m. in the morning, which our service starts at about 6:30 in the morning. So it would allow us to kind of look and see if these containers had any issues on there. They also are very much facing internally into the dumpster. So if someone's in the dumpster, like fully in the dumpster, they would get their picture on there. But most people, even if the doors are open, you really couldn't see any of the actual anyone in there. So we don't think there was any privacy concerns there. We also have something that's called one-party consent in Ohio, which allows us to take pictures. These are on public property, they're public containers. It would just feel like having like a camera at an intersection or something like that. But so we haven't had any privacy concerns with that. I think from my standpoint, I think the cameras were very interesting and gave us some good information. I don't think it's something that you will see us continuing to use as we look to expand this program. It was just as easy if we're servicing these things twice a week for our crews to see if there's a problem. It may not be in real time, but it might be a day or 2 later, which is plenty good in terms of the service we have. And we think for the cost on those cameras and just sometimes, it's just easier to do things manually. And, the cameras are great and kind of really cool, but I don't think it's something that's necessary.
Okay. Well, with the shutdown of our session, we have about 18 minutes left. So let's bring Matt up and then we'll answer all your questions at the end until we run out of time. How's that, everybody? So great job, Ari. And let's get Matt up.
I think we want to do Evan. Yeah.
I mean, Evan, sorry, Evan.
Yeah,
I'm looking at somebody by the name of Matt here and I'm looking at Matt. Is that him?
Yeah,
Hi, Evan.
Evan, if you can turn on your camera, I can add a spotlight on you.
Yeah, I see everybody but Evan.
All righty. Can you guys hear and see me?
We can't
Yes.
see you yet.
I could see him.
Okay, there we go.
There he is.
Now we can.
There
Welcome.
you are. Hi, Evan.
All right. Hey, everyone. Just want to give a shout out and a thank you to NRC. It's a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for Ari for giving the case study for Columbus. It's always great to see what's going on in other parts of the country. And also to Matt for giving that excellent overview of what the context of multifamily recycling as it exists in the country today. It is an issue. It's an issue that's improving, and it's exciting to be on that frontier of recycling. So yeah, I'm Evan Novell with City of Orlando. I've been with the city for almost 5 years now, and for that entire tenure, I've worked in recycling, both commercial and multifamily and residential, in addition to commercial food waste, residential composting, and a couple other supplemental initiatives that the city is running in terms of its overall sustainability plan. So just because I get a lot of questions on whether or not the things that City of Orlando employs are applicable to other municipalities, I just want to give a brief overview of our operational scope. Orlando is only a hauler, so unfortunately we are not we don't own or operate our own MRFs or transfer stations. We're strictly a hauler. So a lot of the agency that we lack on that end of processing, we make up by our educational campaigns and also through our grant assistance through recycling partnership. That's how we're able to make our impact. That is likely to change in the next 5 to 10 years. if not a little bit sooner. But as it exists right now, we're strictly a hauler. We house a compressed natural gas fleet of about 26 commercial vehicles, in addition to rear load and ASL. We have exclusivity over commercial front-end loaded garbage service. This is not the case for recycling or roll-off or compactor service. The division operates a commercial roll-off franchise as well as several compactors throughout the city. And we service about six. Yes.
We're only seeing the first slide.
Okay. You're not seeing the operational scope slide?
No.
Open presentation.
Yeah, Evan, on the bottom right, right next to the minus sign, there's a little presentation icon. If you can just click on that.
Sorry, right next to the what sign?
Right in your PowerPoint, where it gives the percent scale and then plus minus next to that minus sign. There's a little presentation icon. Yep. Oh.
Let me try sharing again.
Where the minus sign is?
Okay, here.
Yep. On the
Yeah, just to the
right
left of
right
that.
to the left of that next icon. Yep.
There you go.
That.
Right there. Click on that.
Okay. You guys see an operational scope?
No, you need to really click on that. Oh, get off the
Can also go to the tab slideshow at the top.
Yeah, try that.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, there you go. To the left
Yeah, I need to move.
Just from the beginning.
from the beginning.
This is blocking my
Do you want to just go ahead and do it for NRC?
here we go. Okay, from current slide.
Yeah, it's not working.
Yeah, I don't know if resume slideshow. Is that working?
No. Do you want to run it NRC?
Sure.
No, where's she at? She's bringing it up. Sorry, folks.
A number of technical difficulties for this session where there are a ton of really great speakers and excellent content. So stay tuned.
While you're working on that, maybe we can do. Yeah, they're not in the slides are not in. Yeah, we already know that. Cameras. While she's doing that, let's keep on asking questions. Okay,
All
here.
right, just guide me to next slide when you're ready.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so we operate a commercial roll-off franchise as well as several compactors throughout the city. We service about 60,000 residential homes and about 11,000 units. There's about 50,000 units across the city of Orlando, but we're just one of about 24 different haulers. And like I said, we don't have exclusivity over recycling, so some of those properties and those units are serviced by other haulers. We service and maintain about 5,000 dumpsters. Recycling is voluntary across all sectors. So I know there might be some confusion as to why a mandatory recycling ordinance is recycling, and I'm going to get a little bit more into that. But the short story is that it's compulsory at a property management level, but it's not enforced at a resident or tenant level, if that makes sense. approximately 80 drivers and refuse collectors, and we have a highly active research and administrative staff. Next slide, please. All right, so just going to Orlando's multifamily spectrum. This probably isn't too different from most municipalities across the country, but it may be, depending on where you are. We have full spectrum, mid-rise and high-rise properties, with the majority of our properties being the garden style variety. So more of that urban sprawl type of setup. Roughly 1/3 of our properties are considered low to moderate income, and that's pretty significant, especially considering our second iteration of our partnership with the recycling partnership is addressing a lot of those low to moderate income properties to ensure we're being more equitable when it comes to providing recycling opportunities to our overall community. The spectrum includes apartments, condominiums, assisted living, affordable housing, and age-restricted communities, and then the full class range from A to D. Like I said, a total of about 50,000 units across 500 properties, and our multifamily sector is expanding as well. Unfortunately, not able to keep up with the demand, but it is expanding rapidly. We utilize every type of truck to service our multifamily customers. Most apartments with recycling now have between 0.02 and 0.5 cubic yards per unit of recycling capacity. Nowhere near the amount, the amount allotted to residential homes, which is typically 0.5 cubic yards, one cart. But this is doubled, tripled, or basically exponentially increased since we've implemented this ordinance. Next slide, please. All right, so just take a brief look at the policy development and recycling history. We've had residential recycling for about 2 decades now, and it's really been about a decade since it's kind of caught on that, multifamily has been lacking. And we had a lot of outreach from residents, which prompted our commissioners, our mayor, and our solid waste division manager to spring into action, offer some sort of solution to multifamily and also commercial recycling. So around 2012, our first iteration of commercial and multifamily recycling was to establish public drop-off locations. At any point in time over the past decade, we've had anywhere between 4 to 8 of these, pretty evenly spread out throughout the city, maybe a couple more in more dense areas, more densely populated. And we currently have 6 to this day. We from time to time bring them down to refurbish them, clear off graffiti, or address contamination concerns, but we plan to have those even after every property is in compliance with recycling, just because people still may need them. Leaping to 2016, actual policy planning begins for our mandatory Chapter 28 recycling ordinance. 2017, solid waste staff host or attend over 24 stakeholder engagement meetings. I would probably tell you that obviously the legal aspect of policy and planning, policy procedure planning is probably the most important part, but stakeholder engagement, especially what we've seen, has been by far the most important part. A year's worth of stakeholder engagement ensured that when it came time in 2018 for our first and second ordinance hearings, that there were no naysayers, no pushback, anything that had been a cause for concern during that stakeholder engagement process. We were able to assuage a lot of those property management officials or local homeowner association groups that this was going to be conducive to their plans. It was not going to be an obstruction. It was not going to be a burden, and we're still seeing the results of that today. And then we have the ordinance implementation in 2019. Next slide, please. All right, so some of the ordinance specifics. Our previous division manager always liked to say that it was meant to provide the opportunity to recycle. So it is compulsory at the property management level. You have to provide that opportunity, but you as an individual resident or tenant are not, it's not enforced. We're not going to fine you if you're not participating. It just has to be available to you. It applies to all properties with 4 or more units. That's on the multifamily side. That's how the city defines a multifamily property. It's phased in over 4 years, and that's, for all parties involved, it makes it easier. It allows us to adapt to an influx of new customers, and it allows time for properties to include recycling into their budget, whether or not they need to add infrastructure or just the service. A multi-use property can determine how it comes into compliance. So if you have, a commercial business on floor 1 and floors 2 through 30 are residential, you get to decide how you come into compliance if those 2 do not align in terms of the phasing. Compliance requires three things: a container, ongoing service for the container, and the submittal of a recycling verification form. And that's going to be renewed annually starting April 1st of next year. The responsibility falls to the property management. So a lot of times we get a question of, how are we going to charge our residents for the new recycling service? Well, it's actually the property management's responsibility to provide that to their residents. Properties can choose from a list of approved haulers. We are not the only hauler. There's about 24 private haulers operating within Orange County. And worst case scenario, we have not had to do this. We haven't even come close to it, but a certificate of occupancy can be pulled in the event of non-compliance. Typically, our mindset is if you're willing to work with us, we're willing to work with you. And that's my job, is to tailor those recycling programs in a way that allows you to come into compliance. Exemptions and waivers are an option. This is more frequent on the commercial side. If you operate a smoothie shop and 99% of your waste is food waste, you don't need a recycling program. But we do have certain neighborhoods where they have their own legal stipulations that don't allow them to have, for example, a non-screened refuse container, even if it's recycling. So while they incorporate that into their budget, or submit plans to our permitting division, we issue those waivers or exemptions for up to a year. The recycling verification form is tied to our permitting process. So there was a question earlier about development and are developers forced to comply with infrastructural concerns or stipulations, regulations. So when developers submit plans to the city of Orlando now, there is an actual solid waste reviewer, myself, who looks at these plans and determines whether or not the infrastructure is sufficient enough for our vehicles to access. Is the ingress egress appropriate? Is there enough backup space, overhead space, those types of things? So no plan gets approved now unless it's also approved by myself at solid waste. And then, like I said, recycling verification forms are updated and resubmitted annually as of April 1st next year. Next slide. Here's our phasing timeline. Phase 1 began on October 1st, 2019. That's all of our new construction or developments making substantial improvements. Phase 2, this is our largest phase. And the reason why we kind of tackled our largest properties first is because it allows us to make the biggest impact in terms of bringing more recyclable in by tonnage, but it's also the fewest number of properties. So it doesn't burden our fleet or other private haulers' fleets when it comes to addressing that influx of new recycling customers, but we're still able to make that bigger impact. And that began April 1st, 2020. Our third phase, April 1st, 2021, was all of our medium-sized properties. And our fourth phase, which concludes April 1st of next year, is any other properties. Most of our smaller properties. And it is likely that we will extend this just because COVID has created such a big obstacle for not just us, but everyone kind of involved in the whole multifamily recycling process, financially, spatially. We're likely going to extend this out at least 6 months to another year or two. Next slide. All right, so just a brief look at some of the common challenges and then some of the ways that Orlando has addressed some of these challenges. A lot of these on the left are going to be very familiar if you're in the multifamily recycling industry at all. So just as an example, corporate approval can be a lengthy process. I know when I go out to visit property managers and inform them that they're going to have to recycle within the next year, they always, one of the most instant rebuttals is, well, I'm going to have to run this through corporate. And in order to work around this, we issue mailers, we send out mailers, we conduct site visits at least a year out from compliance date. And we iterate on that typically every 3 or 4 months just to make sure everyone is kind of on what's happening, what's going on, especially considering the turnover rate at multifamily property management firms. Sometimes those mailers or those visits can kind of slip through the cracks. HOAs or other neighborhood entities have their own zoning stipulations or restrictions. Mentioned this before, so we do issue temporary 1-year exemptions, giving those properties time to adjust. Like I said, it's not meant to be burdensome. It's meant to provide that opportunity. We're not trying to come off as the recycling inquisition. We're trying to make it as seamless as possible and provide that opportunity. Spatial issues, so not enough space on the property for an extra dumpster. We don't want to give up a parking spot. Moving forward, new developments will be required to have double enclosures. Not just that, but in the city of Orlando, we are allowed to put recycling dumpsters in parking spots, put them on wheels and put them into parking garages where we can wheel them in and out. We can even put them in public right of way sometimes. Properties often set their budget up to 1 year in advance. You know, this is a cost issue. Fortunately, at the City of Orlando, our recycling process prices often save properties money. Yard for yard, our recycling is half the cost of garbage. We're an enterprise fund, you know, we don't rely on taxpayer dollars, so we're able to supplement that potential loss by providing recycling to people who don't use us for our commercial garbage service, but also just because we're generating that revenue anyway. COVID created a shift in residential and commercial recycling streams. A lot of us saw this, you know, people working from home. There's less commercial recycling and an increase in residential and multifamily recycling. Because this were renewed and rebranded our educational efforts, a lot of our signage. Ongoing steel shortage and price increases. We've supplemented a lot of our assets with plastic dumpsters. So that's been a big boon for us in being able to provide our service and our containers, you know, in spite of ongoing steel shortages and price increases. And then I'd be curious to see if this is a problem elsewhere in the country, but Orlando, Florida, we have an ongoing shortage of CDL drivers. CDL holders. So in response to that, we held our first ever public works hiring event. It was incredibly successful. And I think it's something we're going to do annually, if not semi-annually. Next slide. All right, so look at some ordinance results thus far. Since the ordinance implementation, Orlando has increased max recycling capacity by over 9,000 cubic yards, roughly 1,200 tons. It's important to note that all these figures on this slide are only in reference to Orlando's efforts. So remember, there are about 20 to 24 other recycling haulers operating within Orange County. So this number is likely much larger. We just aren't able to keep track, and we don't require reporting for other private haulers. So just keep that in mind. It's only representative of the city's recycling operation. This has the potential to divert another 12% of our municipal solid waste from the landfill based on 2021 numbers. Recycling is currently available to approximately 31,000 units out of our 50,000. We've distributed 5,000 units, 5,000 totes to our units. That's actually increased as well over the past month or two. Over 12,000 units have received informational half pagers, bilingual, and over 3,000 units have received property-specific recycling instructions. So those are bilingual as well, and that can be like, your recycling chute is located in the southwest corner of the building. Your recycling dumpster is located between buildings 11 and 12, that type of thing. You know, what to take, how to properly use your container, and utilize those on-site recycling containers. Next slide. All right, so we also like to measure our success at the city. The left graph here, all you're looking at is submitting recycling verification form. So we have a 90% satisfaction rate and about an 87% trust in the city rate for that recycling program. And then on the right, this is the specifics for that program. So you can see we have an 83% trust the city and 87% that who are satisfied with that, with the overall multifamily recycling program. So what we determine is that people are more likely to participate if they have trust in the system. And that's, you know, for me and my team and all the other project managers, you know, we like seeing these numbers. We monitor them monthly, and you know, we address any concerns that pop up through this monitoring platform. Next slide. So how is ordinance implementation possible in Orlando? We have a dedicated project management staff, including myself, 2 other project managers, and anywhere between 2 and 4 associates or coordinators. I'm able to tailor recycling programs to overcome challenges at any property. That's the majority. That's the majority of what I do at my job is go to a property, figure out what is not going to work there, what is going to work, and provide them with that information, even if they don't choose us for their recycling hauler. We have ongoing grants through Recycling Partnership and are finishing up our second one now to help facilitate and incentivize compliance. Our recycling prices are yard for yard, half the cost of garbage. And from the very get-go, this was a result of overwhelming feedback and requests for recycling availability. So, you know, we're definitely not pushing this on our community. People have been asking for this for years. So it was ridiculously easy to implement this from my perspective. I'm sure from a legal perspective, from an early stakeholder engagement, it might have been more difficult, but people have been overwhelmingly appreciative and enthusiastic about this in general. Orlando has a zero waste to the landfill goal by 2040. So along with this program, we supplement it with things like waste diversion efforts to include backyard composting, commercial food waste, residential composting, that type of thing. And yet we have no limitations on our recycling container placement. We can put them pretty much anywhere our vehicles can reach. Next slide. That's it for me. I'd be happy to answer any other questions. There's my contact information if you don't get your question answered here. And thank you.
Hi, everyone. I spoke with the powers to be, and because of our issues, we are staying on. There were still 65 people on and no rush. So I want to make sure that I ask all the questions. The cameras is a big question. I've even shared that with my friends in LA, in California. They're like, wow, that's amazing. Let's see. Do you have more? You want to bring everybody up so everybody can answer now?
Yep.
There.
Let's get everybody with their cameras on, and I'll add
Yeah.
spotlights.
So, guys, do you have more cooperation in owner-occupied units or rental units? We've seen better luck with managers of owner-occupied units. You there? They're on mute. They're all on mute. There you go,
Yeah,
Matt.
so yeah, I personally don't know if there is a difference. I don't work for local government anymore, so I'm not sure. That's an interesting question though, but I don't know.
Ari and Evan,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
So we haven't really noticed a difference. So we don't, the units we were trying to kind of recruit for this program, we wanted, to have a good number of units in there. And so a lot of those, the owner was part of a larger corporation. So I think it didn't really matter. I think what we really found is if the property manager was really interested in this stuff and really driving it, that's where we saw the engagement. They also had the most direct contact with the residents that live there and could do the continued education. So when we had really good property managers, that's where we see the most success.
That's true. Evan, you guys can stay off. You can, because I'm asking more questions though. These questions, because they were all mixed and everything. So just go ahead. We have time. Like I said, I called the powers and I'm like, we're staying on. This is
sorry, just so I'm clear,
participate.
is this the stakeholder process question, or what was it? I stepped away.
This has to do with occupation. You know what? Let me change the question. What's it cost to run these programs, and how's cost recovered?
Sure, I can speak for City of Orlando. We don't typically. It comes up to maybe like $5 or $6 per unit. It really depends on what's being. At Orlando, we started out by providing each unit with the same thing, and what we found is that sort of blanket approach didn't necessarily work for every apartment complex. Maybe the issue wasn't that the property needed in-unit totes. Maybe they just needed an educational revamp. Maybe a property did need totes. So we don't really. I don't have a figure for the exact amount of money that's been spent both by grant and by City of Orlando. But for example, if we supplied a unit with a tote, educational material, actual time as a resource, like my time or the city's time, it comes out to maybe $5 to $7 per unit. The bulk of that being for the tote. So it's drastically less if they're not getting a hard plastic tote. If we're giving out a bag, it's a few dollars cheaper. But I would say probably anywhere from that $1 to $7 range, depending on what we applied at that property.
And this is a good question because my team always right size. I don't care, we don't just put out containers. So question for all of you, are you all adding right sizing to offset any future recycling costs? Are you just going out and putting containers?
Yep, City, again, sorry, I don't want to speak over if anyone's got anything else to say, but yeah, we right size for free. And then that's part of our benefit as well. We have limited assets. So if an 8-yard dumpster can work better at a different property and it's too much at this property, we're definitely going to utilize the containers the best way that we can.
So in Columbus, we are probably really unique here. We're the largest city in the country that doesn't charge any service fees for any refuse related materials. So we're fully funded by the general fund here in the city. And so it's a service that we are providing for the residents. But of course, we're trying to right size. The costs that we have are the cost of additional dumpsters, which are not that much. And currently what we have is we have a dedicated front end loader truck and a driver that is running a route 5 days a week that is just picking up recycling from our multifamily units. And so I think as we look at expanding that, it's adding additional to the costs are us adding additional trucks and then staff capacity for it. In terms of our tipping fees, that's been rolled into our larger kind of recycling contract at our MRF here. So we can dump up to 1,000 tons a year there. So I think that is something we're not necessarily recovering any of the costs from that, but it is a service that we see is more efficient, and we think in the long run it'll be cheaper for us to have more material going there than tipping it at the landfill.
And everybody is mesmerized by that cool looking, what is that, a 8-yarder recycling bin with the little slide on the side? What is that called? And that's a front loader, of course.
Yeah, it's
So-
front load dumpster. So it's just we wanted to make sure that there are easy access panels on the side, so there are sliding doors that people can just kind of go up. But we also, on the top of the lid of the dumpster, there's actually a slot there so that you can slide in cardboard and everything else too, which makes it really, really easy.
Let me see.
I had a question for Ari on that as well. We started out utilizing those dumpsters as well, the side door ones, and what we found is that as people got better and better at recycling, there was less and less bag recycling. We found material actually spilling out of those. So we switched to same size dumpsters, but not the sliding doors, and it created a whole different issue because we have a significant elderly population in Florida. A lot of people come here to retire, and a lot of them can't reach up. The dumpster's too big or too heavy for them to lift that. So we got a lot of feedback saying, hey, we can't recycle anymore because a lot of our community can't lift those. So it's just interesting to see how it's different from one place to the next, and to see how that worked for you all, if it's been successful or if you've encountered some of the same issues.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't had any issues yet. They do fill up, and when they do fill up, it's really tough to you have to go through the top of the container. But so we haven't seen any major issues yet since we've been trying to right size them in real time. So if they are filling up too quickly, we'll just put a second dumpster right next to them. But that's an interesting point that you bring up about some of the elderly populations, because we do have some elderly populations in our multifamily units, and I think that's probably a good reason for us to keep those side doors.
Okay,
And
everybody, I was going to say that we need to go, but be sure to look for the guys over in the little, what is that? The little retrack area? Is that what it's called? The
That's
little
right.
the party. Look for Ari, Evan, and Matt, and I appreciate you guys. Nice to meet you. It was awesome, and I enjoyed moderating this session. Everybody, God bless. Be safe. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, everybody. And we are right on the foot of the next session. So hosts and co-hosts and speakers, please turn
Time to
on
go.
cameras for the next session, which is outreach to underserved communities.